Hello, friends. We think we know what power feels like. We look for it in the prestige of a promotion, the roar of a fast car, or the quiet security of a heavy bank account. But imagine waking up in a body where gravity itself bows to your mood. Today, you are immortal, bound by the ticking of clocks and the frustration of morning traffic. In that time, you are bound only by the iron threads of fate and the unpredictable whims of Zeus. Consider the sheer scale of that existence. Imagine shape-shifting into a swan just to spy on a neighbor, or hurling a jagged lightning bolt across the sky simply because you woke up feeling grumpy. You aren't reaching for caffeine in the morning. You are dining on honey cakes that stop you from ever aging, keeping the rot of time far from your skin. I am just a guy fascinated by these old stories and reading them to you. If you want to stay for the journey, I would appreciate the subscription. Before we ascend the mountain together, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? Now, take a breath. Let your shoulders drop. Unclench your jaw, and let the sharp smell of ozone and the thick scent of burnt offerings fill the air. You are waking up. The first thing you notice isn't the light, but the weight of your own existence shifting. That ozone you smelled a moment ago, it's no longer outside of you. It is being pulled into your lungs, but it doesn't feel like air. It feels like lightning. As you lie there, the stone beneath you isn't cold. It's humming with a frequency that matches the new rhythm of your heart. But that heart isn't pumping the heavy, salted red of your previous life. Inside your veins, a violent alchemy is taking place. The iron, the hemoglobin, the biological debris of mortality, it's all being incinerated. In its place flows Ichor. It is a molten, translucent gold, thinner than blood, but infinitely more pressurized. You can feel it surging through your carotid artery, a searing warmth that makes your vision pulse with every beat. It doesn't just carry oxygen, it carries intent. It carries the weight of every prayer ever whispered into the dark. This is the liquid fire that sustains the eternal, and as it reaches your extremities, the dull ache of being human, the stiff joints, the heavy limbs, the constant low-grade fatigue simply evaporates. Try to move your hand. Your skin doesn't look the same. Under the surface, there is a soft, terrifying glow, as if you've swallowed a star and your flesh is struggling to contain the brilliance. You are becoming translucent, yet you feel more solid than granite. When you finally press your palms against the ground to push yourself up, the marble doesn't feel like a floor. It feels like the very roof of the world. Look down, not at your feet, but past them. You are standing on the peak of a spire so high that the concept of weather has become an abstraction. Below you, the storm clouds you once feared are nothing more than a thin, tattered carpet of gray wool. They are miles beneath your heels. From this height, the curvature of the earth is visible, a sapphire marble, drowned in the haze of a lower atmosphere that you no longer belong to. This brings us to the air. You try to take a deep breath, expecting the thin, freezing gasp of a mountain climber, but what meets your throat is the aether. To a mortal, this substance is a poison. It is too pure,
too bright, a concentrated essence of the cosmos that would sear human lungs to ash in seconds. But to you, it is the only thing that tastes like life. The air down there, the thick, humid soup of the valleys where men live and die, now seems like a swamp. Up here, the aether is sharp, tasting of citrus and burnt sugar and the cold vacuum of space. It is the breath of the gods, and it fuels the gold in your veins. As you struggle to find your balance in this new crystalline reality, the silence is broken. The clouds around the perimeter of the peak begin to churn, not from wind, but by design. You aren't alone. 3 figures emerge from the mist, moving with a synchronized grace that suggests they aren't walking so much as they are part of the landscape's natural flow. These are the Harai, the Hours. They are the gatekeepers of the high places, the wardens of the seasons, and the watchers of the way. They do not look at you with the reverence you might expect. Instead, their gaze is clinical, ancient, and deeply suspicious. They have watched 1,000 stars die and 100 civilizations rise from the mud. To them, your arrival is a bureaucratic event, a shift in the celestial equilibrium that must be measured. One of them, Thalo, steps forward, her eyes the color of a fresh spring meadow, yet as hard as jade. She isn't looking at your face. She is looking at the luminescence of your skin, checking the purity of the ichor, ensuring that no trace of the red, muddy earth still clings to your soul. They are the ones who decide if the gates of the cloud veil will open for you, or if the mountain will reject you, casting you back down to the world of shadows and rot. You feel their collective gaze like a physical weight, a pressure against your new golden heart. They are checking your credentials, searching for the spark of true divinity amidst the shock of your awakening. You are a stranger in the high country, a nouveau riche intruder in the house of the eternal. As you stand before them, the sheer scale of the mountain and the burning purity of the aether make one thing very clear. Waking up is the easy part. Staying awake in a place that demands perfection is where the true terror begins. The marble beneath your feet is not stone, but a pressurized slab of frozen light, vibrating with the collective heartbeat of the mountain. As you step into the central chamber, the air changes. It loses its thin alpine crispness and becomes something heavy, scented with ozone, dry wine, and the ancient smell of sun-scorched earth. You are walking into the nerve center of the universe, and the occupants of this room are not merely people with power. They are the laws of physics personified, and they are currently evaluating your right to exist. At the highest point of the tiered dais sits a figure that makes your lungs seize. He does not look like a king from a storybook. He looks like a brewing storm held together by sheer force of will. This is Zeus. He doesn't sit on his throne so much as he haunts it. His breathing is a low, rhythmic rumble that you feel in your teeth, a sound that suggests at any moment he might decide the atmosphere no longer requires oxygen. He doesn't look at you with curiosity. He looks at you with the bored, terrifying intensity of a predator who has already mapped out every way you could fail. To him, you are a potential glitch in his perfect, terrifying clockwork. He represents the ultimate psychological wall, the authority that is absolute because it is inevitable. To his right, Hera watches you with a gaze that feels like a razor blade drawn across the skin. Her beauty is a weapon, polished to a mirror finish, but it's her silence that unnerves you. She is the architect of the mountain's social order, the gatekeeper of the elite. Her jealousy isn't the petty emotion of a mortal spouse. It is a structural, foundational defense of the hierarchy. To her, you are a biological anomaly, a variable that has been introduced into a closed system without her approval. She isn't looking for your potential. She is looking for the cracks in your facade, the lingering traces of the human clay you used to be, so she can use them to dismantle you. And then there is the shadow. In a corner where the light of the ether seems to bend and die, Hades sits in a chair of obsidian. He is the outlier, a guest from the basement of reality who brings the chill of the deep earth into this hall of fire. He doesn't share the frantic ego of his siblings. He watches you with a cold, academic patience, the way a scientist might watch a moth fluttering toward a flame. He knows that eventually everyone belongs to him. His presence is a reminder that even for an immortal, there is a finality, a psychological weight that no amount of golden nectar can truly wash away. You stand at the center of this triangle of wills, and this is where the law of domains begins to crush the breath from your body. You might have imagined that becoming a god meant you could do anything, but the reality is the exact opposite. You have been granted the ultimate power, but it is a power with a very narrow focus. This is the psychological cage of the pantheon. If you are the god of the hearth, you are the hearth. You cannot decide one morning to go and stir the tides of the ocean. You cannot decide to take up the bow if your essence is the forge. The law of domains dictates that your identity is your prison. You are a specialist in a world that demands you never deviate from your specific divine function. To step outside your defined essence is not just a social error, it is a violation of the cosmic blueprint that keeps the stars in their tracks. You are now a gear in a machine that has been running for eons, and the other gears are waiting to see if you will jam the works. The tension in the room is a physical weight. Every eye in the hall is cataloging your posture, the way your ichor flows beneath your skin, the slight hesitation in your step. They are looking for the human mistake, the moment you forget you are a god and act like a person. They want to see if you will trip over the weight of your own immortality. You are the newest addition to a gallery of beautiful monsters, and as the king of gods shifts his weight, the thunder in his chest echoing through your own ribs, you realize that you aren't here to be welcomed. You are here to be tested. The floor beneath you is beautiful, the light is divine, and the gold in your veins is heavy. But you have never been more trapped in your entire life. Everyone is watching, and the mountain does not permit a second draft. The marble beneath your feet is not stone, but a pressurized slab of frozen light, vibrating with the collective heartbeat of the mountain. As you step into the central chamber, the air changes. It loses its thin alpine crispness and becomes something heavy, scented with ozone, dry wine, and the ancient smell of sun-scorched earth. You are walking into the nerve center of the universe, and the occupants of this room are not merely people with power. They are the laws of physics personified, and they are currently evaluating your right to exist. At the highest point of the tiered dais sits a figure that makes your lungs seize. He does not look like a king from a storybook. He looks like a brewing storm, held together by sheer force of will. This is Zeus. He doesn't sit on his throne so much as he haunts it. His breathing is a low, rhythmic rumble that you feel in your teeth, a sound that suggests at any moment he might decide the atmosphere no longer requires oxygen. He doesn't look at you with curiosity. He looks at you with the bored, terrifying intensity of a predator who has already mapped out every way you could fail. To him, you are a potential glitch in his perfect, terrifying clockwork. He represents the ultimate psychological wall, the authority that is absolute because it is inevitable. To his right, Hera watches you with a gaze that feels like a razor blade drawn across the skin. Her beauty is a weapon, polished to a mirror finish, but it's her silence that unnerves you. She is the architect of the mountain's social order, the gatekeeper of the elite. Her jealousy isn't the petty emotion of a mortal spouse. It is a structural, foundational defense of the hierarchy. To her, you are a biological anomaly, a variable that has been introduced into a closed system without her approval. She isn't looking for your potential. She is looking for the cracks in your facade, the lingering traces of the human clay you used to be, so she can use them to dismantle you. And then there is the shadow. In a corner where the light of the ether seems to bend and die, Hades sits in a chair of obsidian. He is the outlier, a guest from the basement of reality who brings the chill of the deep earth into this hall of fire. He doesn't share the frantic ego of his siblings. He watches you with a cold, academic patience, the way a scientist might watch a moth fluttering toward a flame. He knows that eventually everyone belongs to him. His presence is a reminder that even for an immortal, there is a finality, a psychological weight that no amount of golden nectar can truly wash away. You stand at the center of this triangle of wills, and this is where the law of domains begins to crush the breath from your body. You might have imagined that becoming a god meant you could do anything, but the reality is the exact opposite. You have been granted the ultimate power, but it is a power with a very narrow focus. This is the psychological cage of the pantheon. If you are the god of the hearth, you are the hearth. You cannot decide one morning to go and stir the tides of the ocean. You cannot decide to take up the bow if your essence is the forge. The law of domains dictates that your identity is your prison. You are a specialist in a world that demands you never deviate from your specific divine function. To step outside your defined essence is not just a social error, it is a violation of the cosmic blueprint that keeps the stars in their tracks. You are now a gear in a machine that has been running for eons, and the other gears are waiting to see if you will jam the works. The tension in the room is a physical weight. Every eye in the hall is cataloging your posture, the way your ichor flows beneath your skin, the slight hesitation in your step. They are looking for the human mistake, the moment you forget you are a god and act like a person. They want to see if you will trip over the weight of your own immortality. You are the newest addition to a gallery of beautiful monsters, and as the king of gods shifts his weight, the thunder in his chest echoing through your own ribs, you realize that you aren't here to be welcomed. You are here to be tested. The floor beneath you is beautiful, the light is divine, and the gold in your veins is heavy. But you have never been more trapped in your entire life. Everyone is watching, and the mountain does not permit a second draft. But the lack of a revision doesn't mean the silence is absolute. In fact, the silence is the first thing you lose. You might expect the hearing of a god to be a sharpened version of human ears, a way to catch the rustle of a leaf miles away. But it is closer to a radio left on between stations, catching every frequency at once. The prayers don't come to you as spoken sentences or polite requests. They rise from the earth like a heavy gray smoke, thick with the scent of burning bay leaves and charred meat. This is the data stream of the divine. To you, a prayer is a pressure behind the eyes, a persistent vibration in the marrow of your bones. Thousands of voices do not wait their turn. They overlap, a chaotic chorus of grief, greed, and desperate hope. A mother in a dry valley begs for rain. A soldier in a muddy trench begs for the strength to kill. A merchant at the docks begs for a favorable wind. You don't hear them with your ears. You feel them as a biological necessity, an itch that can only be scratched by intervention. It is an unrelenting cacophony that tethers you to the dirt you supposedly left behind. You find yourself sorting through the static, learning to filter the white noise of a million trivial wishes to find the one sharp, clear spike of genuine devotion that demands a response. It is exhausting, a psychic weight that makes the golden ichor in your veins feel like lead. When you decide to answer, or when the mountain becomes too small for your restless spirit, you discover the terrifying efficiency of divine locomotion. For a mortal, travel is a sequence of steps, a measurement of distance against time. For you, distance has become an outdated concept. If you wish to be on the shores of a distant sea, you do not go there. You simply cease to be here and start being there. It is a folding of reality, a collapse of the map until the point of departure and the point of arrival are the same spot. This instantaneous movement is a jarring shift in perspective, a strobe light existence where your life becomes a series of still frames across the globe. But you quickly learn that while you can move with the speed of a thought, you rarely do so when people are watching. The mechanics of divinity are as much about theater as they are about physics. You keep the golden chariot in the clouds not because you need the wheels or the white-maned horses, but because the mortals need to see the trajectory. They need the sun to move across the sky at a pace they can comprehend. To simply appear is a glitch in their reality. To arrive in a blaze of light and thunder is a story they can tell for 1,000 years. You learn to perform your movements, slowing yourself down to the speed of a miracle, just to satisfy the craving of awe in the eyes of those below. This sense of performance extends to the objects you carry. You look down at the weight in your hand, perhaps a 3-pronged spear or a polished bow, and you realize it isn't a tool. A carpenter uses a hammer. You are the lightning. The trident is not an instrument you picked up from a rack. It is a literal prosthetic of your will. When your fingers wrap around the cool, familiar grip, the sensation doesn't stop at your skin. You feel the current of the deep ocean through the metal. You feel the tectonic plates grinding beneath the seabed. To lift the weapon is to lift the sea itself. There is no learning curve, no need for practice or drills. You possess the muscle memory of 1,000 years you haven't actually lived. The symbol and the god are a single fused entity. If you were to drop it, you would feel as though you had lost a limb, a phantom ache vibrating where the power used to be. It is a heavy burden, carrying a piece of the world's foundation in your palm, knowing that a single careless flick of your wrist could drown a coastline or level a city. And that is where the true intoxication begins. You stand on a high cliff, looking down at the physical world, and you realize it is no longer solid. To a mortal, a mountain is a permanent fixture of the horizon. To you, it is a suggestion. You reach out a hand, not touching the stone, but feeling the molecular tension of the earth, and you pull. With the ease of a child playing in a sandbox, you watch the granite groan and split, rising up to meet your palm. The rush is unlike any chemical high a human brain could survive. It is the absolute absence of resistance. Every action you have ever taken in your previous life required effort, a struggle against gravity, friction, and your own limitations. Now, the universe has become frictionless. You think of a storm, and the air immediately cools, the humidity spiking until the clouds turn the color of a bruise. You think of fire, and the brush at your feet turns to ash before you even see the flame. It is a terrifying, addictive feedback loop. The more you manipulate the world, the less real it feels. The trees, the oceans, and the people begin to look like props on a stage, fragile and temporary. You are the only thing that is truly solid, the only thing that carries weight. You find yourself playing with the weather just to feel the vibration of the thunder in your chest, or stirring the waves just to see the white foam dance. You are a god, and the world has become your clay. But as you knead it with your thoughts, you begin to wonder if anything you build will ever be as real as the struggle you left behind. The gold in your veins sings with the thrill of creation, but it is a lonely song, echoing in a world that can no longer push back. The silence of the heights is a heavy thing, a weightless pressure that fills your ears until you find yourself straining for the sound of a heartbeat that no longer beats. That lonely song of your own Ichor is a masterpiece played to an empty theater. You find yourself leaning over the edge of the celestial precipice, not because you miss the earth, but because you are starving for the friction of a life that matters. Down there, beneath the veil of clouds that look like frozen marble, the world is moving in a frantic, messy blur. You see the flickers of campfires, the silver veins of rivers, and the white-capped teeth of a sea that used to terrify you. Now it looks like a puddle. The vast distances that once took months to traverse are now nothing more than a momentary thought. You fix your gaze on a single point, a speck of wood and sail caught in a gale near the jagged coast of a forgotten island. On that ship is a man. You recognize the type. You used to be that type. He is shouting orders, his voice lost to the wind, his knuckles white as he grips a railing that is destined to snap. You remember the taste of salt on your lips, and the way the stomach drops when the hull groans under the weight of a rogue wave. For a moment, a phantom pang of empathy twitches in your chest. You want to reach down and steady the wood. You want to be the hand that pushes the clouds aside and lets the morning sun break the storm's back. This is your first instinct, the urge to intervene. It feels like a leftover scrap of your humanity, a lingering habit of caring about the outcome of a struggle. You choose him, this anonymous captain, to be the recipient of your first divine act. You don't use your hands. The physical world is too fragile for your touch now. Instead, you lean into the intention of calm. You command the air to go still and the water to flatten. It happens instantly. The physics of the world buckle under the weight of your whim. The storm doesn't fade, it vanishes, leaving the sea like a sheet of dark glass. You watch, expecting a climax, a moment of profound recognition. You wait for the captain to fall to his knees, to look up at the empty blue sky and know that he has been touched by something infinite. But he doesn't. He wipes the brine from his eyes, barks a gruff order to his crew to check the rigging, and mutters something about the unpredictability of the season. He credits his own luck. He credits the sturdiness of his ship. He moves on as if the miracle you just performed was merely a stroke of good fortune. A new sensation begins to coil in the center of your being. It isn't the warmth of a good deed done. It is a cold, sharp irritation. It is the first spark of divine hubris. You didn't just save his life, you rewrote the laws of nature for him, and he has the audacity to take it for granted. You feel a sudden, jarring disconnect. This man, whose life was literally in your palm seconds ago, suddenly seems incredibly small. Not just physically small, but insignificant in his ignorance. You realize that to him, the world is a series of accidents he survives. To you, the world is a toy box where every piece belongs to you. The irritation grows into a quiet, simmering disdain. Why should you care if he reaches the harbor? Why does his survival matter more than the aesthetic beauty of the storm you just destroyed? You could just as easily reach back down and flick the ship with a finger of lightning. You could watch the wood splinter and the men vanish into the dark water, not out of malice, but out of a desire to see if the second act feels as effortless as the first. This is the shift. The morality you brought with you from the mud and the dust is beginning to evaporate. When you were mortal, death was a tragedy, a finality that demanded grief. From this height, death looks like a candle being blown out in a room full of 1 billion candles. It doesn't change the lighting. You begin to see the people below not as individuals with names and histories, but as fleeting sparks. They are bright for a second, they dance in the dark, and then they are gone. To mourn a spark is an exhausting prospect when you are the sun. You find yourself looking at the enemy of that captain now, a rival fleet waiting just beyond the horizon. You could sink them too. You could give the captain a victory he didn't earn, or you could let him sail into an ambush just to see how he handles the terror. The power to choose is intoxicating, but the detachment is what truly changes you. You are no longer part of their story. You are the author, and an author does not weep for the ink. The irritation fades into a profound, chilling boredom. The mortals are so predictable in their fragility. They pray when they are scared, and they boast when they are safe. They forget the gods the moment the sun comes out. You realize that your intervention didn't bridge the gap between you and the world below. It only made the chasm wider. You are standing on a peak that they cannot even see, holding the strings of a puppet show that has lost its charm. As you turn your gaze away from the ship, leaving the captain to his petty triumphs and his eventual certain end, the gold in your veins feels heavier. It is the weight of a perspective that can no longer find beauty in the smallness of a single life. The empathy that once anchored you to the earth has snapped, and you find yourself drifting further into the cold, brilliant clarity of the divine. They are sparks, and you are the fire. And a fire does not ask the sparks for permission to burn. That fire requires a specific kind of fuel, a sustenance that separates the eternal from the ephemeral. You are no longer satisfied by the heavy, dull textures of bread or the sour tang of wine that turns to vinegar in the gut. Your body now demands something that mirrors the lightning in your veins. You find yourself drawn toward the hall, where the air is thick with the scent of lilies, honey, and the sharp metallic ozone of a coming storm. This is the center of your new world, the golden table where the architects of existence gather to remind themselves that they are not like those they rule. You take your seat among them, and the first thing you notice is the weight of the silence. It is not the peaceful quiet of a forest, but the pressurized hush of a room full of predators who have decided, for the moment, not to eat each other. A servant offers you a chalice of nectar. It glows with a faint bioluminescent gold, and as you drink, the last lingering traces of human fatigue are scorched away. It tastes of every joy you have ever known, distilled into a single, burning liquid. But there is a hook in the sweetness. You realize with a sudden chill that this isn't just luxury, it is a biological necessity. To be a god is to be addicted to immortality. Without the nectar, without the ambrosia that sits on ivory platters like shimmering blocks of sunlight, the ichor in your veins would begin to thin. You would feel the cold fingers of time reaching for you again. The feast is a cage of gold, and you are happy to be locked inside it. As the nectar begins to work, the room softens and the talk begins. In the mortal world, gossip is a pastime. Here, it is a weapon of mass destruction. You watch the way their eyes move, never quite resting on the person they are speaking to. They are looking for weaknesses, for cracks in the divine facade. To your left, Ares is leaning back, his hand resting casually on the hilt of a bronze blade that has never known a sheath. He is laughing, a sound like grinding stones, telling a story about a massacre he sparked because a king forgot to sacrifice a bull in his name. Across from him, Athena is watching him with a cold, analytical detachment. She doesn't speak, but her silence is a loud, ringing condemnation of his lack of strategy. You see the twitch in his jaw. You realize that their rivalry isn't just a disagreement over philosophy. It is a tectonic friction that will eventually manifest as a decade of blood and fire on the plains below. Their petty bickering is the weather report for the next century of human history. The air in the hall is heavy with the scent of old grudges and fresh scandals. Someone mentions a new beauty among the daughters of men, and the atmosphere shifts instantly. It is subtle, a tightening of the shoulders, a sharper glint in Hera's eyes. You see the way the goddesses assess one another, their gazes like scalpels. In this court, beauty is not a gift, it is a currency and a rank. You remember the stories of the apple, the golden fruit inscribed with the words, "To the fairest." You realize now that it wasn't just vanity that caused 3 queens of the cosmos to tear the world apart over a piece of fruit. It was the intolerable insult of being second. For a god, to be less than the absolute is to be nothing. A beauty contest in Olympus is not a pageant. It is a declaration of war. If you are not the most beautiful, the most powerful, or the most feared, you are a target. You watch the way they interact, the layers of subtext in every gesture. A misplaced cup, a slightly delayed nod of recognition, a seat at the table that is 2 inches further from the center than it was yesterday. These are not accidents. They are calculated slights designed to test your resolve. The social life of the gods is a high-stakes game of manners, where a breach of etiquette can lead to a transformation into a spider or 1,000 years of wandering the desert. You find yourself choosing your words with a precision you never possessed as a mortal. You weigh the cost of a smile against the danger of a frown. There is no privacy here, only the illusion of it. Every affair, every secret pact made in the shadows of the colonnades is common knowledge within the hour. They trade secrets like merchants trade silk, and the most valuable secret of all is who the king of the gods is currently looking at with favor. You see the jealousy that simmers just beneath the surface of the laughter. It is a toxic, volatile environment, fueled by the fact that no one can ever die. There is no final resolution, no escape through the grave. You are stuck with these people forever, trapped in a cycle of revenge and reconciliation that will outlast the stars. The feast continues, the plates are refilled, and the music of the lyre drifts through the air, but the tension never truly breaks. You look at the nectar in your cup and realize that this is the price of the fire. You are part of the elite, the untouchable, the divine, but you are also a courtier in a palace where the walls are made of mirrors and the floors are slick with the blood of those who forgot their place. The stakes are cosmic, the rivalries are eternal, and a single mistake in your social graces could set the world on fire. You take another sip of the golden liquid, feeling it burn in your chest, and you smile. You have to. In the court of the gods, a smile is the only shield you have. That smile stays fixed on your face long after the last of the nectar has been swallowed. It has to. If you let the corners of your mouth drop, even for a second, the weight of the silence might actually crush your ribs. You stand there on the edge of the precipice, looking out over the marble balustrade at a world that seems to be moving in fast forward. To a mortal, a lifetime is a grand, sweeping epic. To you, it is the blink of a tired eye. You watch empires rise like mushrooms after a rainstorm and wither just as quickly. You see forests grow, burn, and turn into deserts before you've even finished a single thought. The golden liquid in your veins doesn't just grant you power, it grants you a terrifying surplus of time. Imagine a day that never ends. Now, imagine a year, a century, a millennium where the sun always hits the same angle on the palace floor. In the beginning, it felt like a victory. You had conquered the one enemy that humbles every king, the grave. But as the eras pile up like dust in the corners of your hall, you realize that the grave wasn't an enemy, it was a deadline. And without a deadline, the work of living becomes meaningless. Every joy you experience is diluted by the knowledge that you can have it again and again and again forever. You have tasted every fruit, mastered every tongue, and explored every inch of the world beneath your feet. There is no such thing as a new sensation. When you look at a sunset, you don't see beauty. You see the 10 millionth repetition of a solar cycle. When you listen to a master musician, you don't hear art. You hear the same mathematical patterns you've heard since the Bronze Age. This is the divine ennui, a psychological rot that eats away at the soul when there is no longer anything left to achieve. You are living in a world of infinite abundance, which is just another way of saying you are living in a void. For a human, the scarcity of time is what creates value. They love fiercely because they know they will lose. They build monuments because they know they will be forgotten. They hurry, they sweat, they struggle, and every choice they make carries the heavy, beautiful gravity of consequence. But for you, there is no gravity. Every mistake you make can be fixed in 100 years. Every person you hurt will be dead and buried before you even have the chance to properly apologize. Nothing sticks. Nothing leaves a scar. You are a ghost made of solid gold, drifting through a reality that has become increasingly transparent. This is why you find yourself leaning over the clouds, watching the tiny, frantic lives of the people below with a hunger that borders on the obscene. You aren't watching them because you want to help. You aren't watching them because you care about their morality or their prayers. You are watching them because they are the only things in existence that are actually capable of surprise. They are the only ones who can still feel genuine terror or genuine hope or the raw, jagged edge of a heartbreak that isn't softened by the knowledge of eternity. You start to meddle. It begins small, a shifted wind here, a whispered dream there. You tell yourself it's for their own good, but that's a lie you tell the other gods over dinner. The truth is much darker. You are a bored child at an ant farm, and you are looking for a reaction. You want to see the hero scream at the sky. You want to see the city burn. You want to see the lovers torn apart, not because you were cruel, but because you were desperate to feel a phantom limb of an emotion. You feed on their fragility. Their short, violent, passionate lives are the only things that provide any color in your gray, immortal expanse. You are a parasite of their mortality, using their suffering as a way to remind yourself that you are still alive. But even the meddling loses its flavor eventually. You realize that you've seen every tragedy before. You know how the war ends before the first spear is thrown. You know which king will be betrayed by which son. The humans think they are playing a high-stakes game of destiny, but to you, it's just a rerunning script you've seen for 1,000 seasons. You are trapped in a high-end asylum of your own making. The marble is cold, the air is too perfect, the light is too constant. There is no shadow here because there is no death, and without shadow you cannot truly see the light. This is the psychological horror of the divine. You are a statue that breathes. You are a monument to a life you are no longer truly living. You look at your hands, glowing with the faint radiance of the ichor, and you realize that you would trade it all, the lightning, the throne, the worship of millions, just for the ability to feel that your time is running out. You crave the ticking of a clock. You crave the gray hair and the failing memory. You crave the fear of the dark, because at least the dark means the day is over. But the day is never over. You turn away from the balcony and walk back into the feast, where the other gods are laughing at a joke that was old 10 centuries ago. You pull that smile back onto your face, adjusting the mask until it fits perfectly. You pick up your cup, the gold reflecting the eternal sun, and you prepare yourself for another 1,000,000 years of nothing. You are a god, and you are going to be awake forever. The cage isn't made of bars. It's made of the fact that you can never, ever leave the party. The music from the hall is a dull thrum now, a vibration in the marble beneath your feet, rather than a melody you can actually hear. You stand on the edge of the terrace, looking out over the sprawling, flickering carpet of the human world, and that thought from the party follows you like a shadow. The cage doesn't have bars. It's built out of the terrifying reality that you can never leave this state of being. You are the peak. There is nowhere left to climb, which means there is nowhere to go but inward, into the darker corners of a mind that no longer has any reason to be kind. This is where the shift happens. It starts with your eyes. When you were mortal, you looked at a crowd and saw 1,000 stories, 1,000 fears, 1,000 loves. Now you look down and you see a colony of ants. They move with such frantic, pointless urgency. They hurry to jobs they hate. They weep over losses that will be forgotten in a century. And they cling to lives that are over in the blink of a divine eye. From this height, their individuality begins to blur. They aren't people anymore. They are a biological phenomenon. They are a crop. And when you stop seeing them as us and start seeing them as it, the cruelty starts to feel less like a choice and more like a law of physics. You think about Arachne. You used to think Athena was a monster for what she did. A girl was proud of her weaving. She was talented. She was perhaps a bit arrogant, but she was just a girl. But as you stand here, feeling the weight of your own infinite perfection, you start to sympathize with the goddess. It wasn't about the thread. It was the sheer, galling audacity of a creature that will be dead by Tuesday, claiming to be equal to the architect of wisdom. It's an aesthetic insult. It's a smudge on a masterpiece. You realize that Athena didn't turn her into a spider out of hatred, but out of a need to correct a category error. A spider weaves because it must. A mortal who thinks she is a god must be reminded that she is merely an insect with a hobby. The disproportionate punishment wasn't about the crime, it was about the distance between the two beings. Then your mind wanders to Actaeon. He was just a hunter who took a wrong turn and saw Diana bathing in a stream, a human mistake. But you feel the itch of Diana's fury now. Your privacy is not a social boundary, it is a cosmic fact. To be seen by a mortal without your permission is a form of ontological theft. He took something that belonged to the divine, the sight of your true form, and he didn't have the soul to hold it. So she didn't just kill him, she stripped him of his humanity, turned him into a stag, and watched as his own hounds, the creatures he loved, tore the life out of him. You find yourself nodding. It makes sense. If the boundary between the sacred and the profane is crossed, the profane must be erased. It's not personal, it's maintenance. The most terrifying part is Marsyas. He challenged Apollo to a music contest. Apollo won, and then he flayed the satyr alive. You used to shudder at the thought of the knife pulling back the skin, the screaming, the raw, red agony. But now you understand the irritation. Marsyas was noise. Apollo is music. When noise tries to compete with music, it must be silenced in a way that ensures it never attempts to speak again. The flaying wasn't just torture. It was an attempt to get beneath the surface, to find where the arrogance lived and peel it away until there was nothing left but the silence of the earth. You look down at the gardener working in the palace gardens below. He's whistling. It's a simple, repetitive tune, and for some reason it grates on your nerves like a saw on bone. He's happy, and his happiness is loud. It's an intrusion. You feel a sudden sharp urge to reach out and touch him, not to bless him, but to change him. You imagine his skin turning into soft green petals, his feet taking root in the soil, his voice fading into the rustle of leaves. You could turn him into a flower right now. He wouldn't be able to whistle anymore. He would just be a silent, pretty thing for you to look at when you're bored, and then ignore when you're not. The horror of the thought should stop you, but it doesn't. Instead, it feels efficient. It feels right. Why should he be allowed to be so noisy in your presence? This is the peak of the corruption, the moment where absolute power stops being a tool and starts being your entire identity. You are losing your ability to feel empathy because empathy requires you to believe that the other person is, in some fundamental way, like you. But no one is like you. You are the gold, and they are the mud. You realize that the humanity you used to value was just a set of limitations. You were kind because you were afraid of being hurt. You were fair because you needed others to be fair to you. But now that you are invulnerable, those rules are gone. There is no one to hold you accountable, no one to tell you no, and no reason to care about the flickering shadows in the valley below. The moral conflict isn't about doing bad things. It's about the fact that bad and good have lost their meaning. There is only what you want and what is in your way. As you stare at the gardener, your hand begins to rise, your fingers curling into the shape of a curse, and you realize with a cold, hollow certainty that you aren't a human who became a god. You are a god who has finally, successfully murdered the human inside you. The golden ichor in your veins doesn't carry love. It only carries the heavy, indifferent weight of eternity. That heavy, indifferent weight of eternity is a burden you carry alone, or so you think as you look down from the heights of your new existence. You stand on the precipice of a world that looks like a toy, a collection of tiny, flickering lives that you could extinguish with a thought. But as the silence of your immortality settles into your marrow, you begin to hear a sound that wasn't there before. It isn't the prayer of a priest or the cry of a warrior. It is a rhythmic, mechanical clicking, the sound of wood sliding against wood, the tension of fiber being pulled taut. It is the sound of the loom. You might imagine that as a god, your will is the ultimate law. You believe that your whims shape the weather, that your anger stirs the oceans, and that your desires are the primary engine of history. But as you turn your gaze toward the shadowed corner of existence, where the light of your own glory fails to reach, you see them. 3 sisters, ancient beyond the memory of the stars, sitting in the gray twilight. They do not look up when you enter. They do not tremble at your radiance. They simply continue their work, pulling strands of white wool from a spinning wheel, measuring it against a rod, and holding the shears ready. They are the Moirai, and they are the only things in existence that do not care that you have murdered your humanity. You watch Zeus, the father of gods and men, the one who supposedly commands the lightning and sits upon the highest throne. You notice for the first time how he avoids looking toward that shadow. You see the subtle tremor in his hand when he passes the cave where the sisters sit. This is the first crack in the golden mask of your divinity, the realization that even the king of Olympus is a prisoner. He does not rule by choice. He rules because a length of string was measured out for him before the first mountain rose from the sea. If he attempted to change a single heartbeat of a mortal already marked for the grave, the very fabric of existence would shred. He isn't a king. He's a glorified administrator, a placeholder in a system he didn't design and cannot alter. And now, so are you. The golden ichor in your veins promised you total agency, yet you find yourself walking a path you didn't pave. Every miracle you perform, every city you burn, every hero you choose to bless, it was already written in the tension of the cord. You aren't the author of your legend. You are merely the lead actor reciting lines that were finished an eternity ago. This is the hidden anxiety of prophecy that haunts the halls of the gods. To a mortal, the future is a mist, a source of hope or a font of fear, but it is always fluid. To you, the future is a stone wall. You can see every inch of it, every jagged edge, and every inevitable collapse, and you are powerless to move a single pebble. The horror of omnipotence is that it is a lie. You have the power to do anything, but you have the freedom to do nothing. To deviate from the pattern is to invite a chaos that even a god cannot survive. You find yourself standing over the bedside of a mortal you once might have loved, watching their breath grow shallow. You have the nectar of the gods in your hand. You could grant them the same golden fire that burns in your own heart, but you feel the phantom weight of the shears against your own neck. You realize that your hand will not move because the loom has not dictated that it should. You are a puppet carved from gold, held up by strings made of a material so strong they make your divine strength look like brittle glass. Then comes the deepest dread, the knowledge of the end. In the mortal world you left behind, death is a tragedy, a sudden stop. But for a god, death has been replaced by something far more corrosive, obsolescence. As you peer into the interwoven strands of the future, you see the thread that represents your own divinity. You see where it begins to fray. You realize that the age of gods is not an eternal state of being, but a season. There will come a time when the prayers stop, when the temples are converted into museums or left to crumble into dust. You see a world that eventually forgets your name, a world where the stories of your power are told as charming metaphors for the weather or the seasons. The Moirai continue their work, and you see them reach for a new material, strands of iron and steam, threads of logic and cold reason that have no place for gods. You realize that you are a character in a story that is destined to be closed and put away on a shelf. The existential dread isn't that you will die, it's that you will become irrelevant. You are a ghost of a future that has already decided it doesn't need you. The shears are always open. They aren't waiting for your life to end. They are waiting for your purpose to vanish. You sit on your throne, the golden Ichor heavy and cold, listening to the clicking of the shuttle. You are a god, yes. You are powerful, yes. But you are also a footnote. You are a prisoner of a script you cannot edit, waiting for the moment when the sisters decide the scene is over and snip the cord, leaving your golden eternity to fall into the dark, silent drawers of history. But even as you stare into that looming silence, wondering when the shears will finally meet, you realize the ground beneath your feet isn't as solid as the marble suggests. You feel a vibration, a low-frequency hum that travels up through the soles of your golden sandals, past your knees, and into the marrow of your immortal bones. It is a reminder that your throne was not a gift, it was a conquest. To understand the weight of the crown you now wear, you have to look down, past the clouds, past the meadows of the upper world, and into the foundations of the earth itself. You are standing on a graveyard, and the ghosts buried there are still breathing. Before the music of Apollo and the order of the laws, there was only the sound of bone snapping against stone. You have been told the stories of the Titanomachy as if they were grand, heroic cycles of struggle. But the sensory memory in your ichor tells a different story. It tells of a decade of unrelenting primal slaughter. You remember the sky turning a bruised purple, the smell of ozone and burnt earth, and the screaming of the old world as it was torn apart. You didn't just defeat the Titans, you dismantled them. You took the architects of your own existence, the very beings who birthed your parents, and you drove them into the blackest pits of the cosmos. This is the secret rot at the heart of your divinity. Your lineage is built on the systematic destruction of your ancestors. You are a usurper, living in a house built from the wreckage of your father's kingdom. Every time you swallow, you feel a phantom tightness in your throat, a remnant of the terror your predecessor felt when he tried to consume his own future. You are the product of a father who saw his children as a meal, and children who saw their father as a prison. This cycle of consumption hasn't ended. It has simply been buried under layers of myth and ritual. Deep below, further than a falling anvil could drop in 9 days and nights, lies the basement of your reality, Tartarus. It isn't just a prison, it is a wound in the universe that refuses to heal. It is where you have stuffed the jagged pieces of the old world that didn't fit into your new, polished order. The Titans are down there, chained by the very gravity they once controlled. When you sit on your throne, you are the weight on the lid of that box. Your brilliance, your light, your effortless power, it is all fueled by the containment of that darkness. You aren't just a ruler, you are a jailer. Every banquet you attend, every prayer you answer, is performed over the muffled shouts of the damned. You pretend not to hear them, but the silence between the lyre notes is filled with their breathing. You wonder in the quiet moments between the nectar and the praise if they are counting the seconds, if they have learned the rhythm of your heartbeat from below and are simply waiting for it to skip. And then there is the monster, the one the mountain cannot hold. Beneath the volcanic rock of Etna, or perhaps directly beneath the throne room itself, something moves that makes even your immortal heart skip a beat. Typhon, a creature of 100 heads, a storm with a voice, the final protest of a nature that refuses to be tamed by your laws. When the ground shakes, it isn't a geological event, it is a heartbeat. It is the reminder that chaos is not a memory, but a living, pulsing entity waiting for a single moment of weakness. You feel his heat through the floorboards. You see the steam rising from the cracks in the stone. You realize that your eternal reign is actually a temporary truce with a hurricane. You are the thin line between a garden and a wasteland. Olympus is often depicted as a playground, a place of leisure and light, but you know better. You see the fortification in every line of the architecture. The high walls aren't there to keep the mortals out. They are there to keep the ancient terrors down. You find yourself checking the horizon more often than you'd like to admit. You watch the way the clouds gather, looking for the shape of a wing or a claw. The psychology of a god is the psychology of a survivor who has moved into the house of his attacker. You are constantly scanning for the crack in the wall, the loose stone, the sign that the old gods have found a way back up. The golden nectar in your cup starts to taste like iron. The laughter of your fellow deities sounds brittle, like glass about to shatter. You are all pretending that the foundations are secure, But every time a vase falls or a storm breaks too violently, you see the same look in their eyes that you feel in your soul, the look of a sentry who knows the enemy is already inside the perimeter. This is the grim reality of your waking life. You are golden, yes, you are powerful beyond measure, but you are also a sentry on a wall that has been under siege since before time had a name. The ichor in your veins is heavy with the knowledge that the world wants to return to the storm. It wants to pull you down into the mud and the fire from which you escaped. Nature, in its rawest form, does not recognize your titles or your temples. It only recognizes the strength required to keep it in a cage. As you look out over your shining kingdom, you realize that the most dangerous thing about being a god isn't the threat of dying. It's the knowledge of what you had to do to live, and the terrifying suspicion that one day the ground will finally open up to take it all back. You aren't living in a paradise. You are standing on a lid that is beginning to buckle under the pressure of 1,000 years of resentment. The mountain is a fortress, and you are the last thing standing between the world and the return of the dark.
But the weight of that fortress is not measured in granite. It is measured in the slow, agonizing friction of time. For a while, the vigilance feels eternal, a singular purpose that defines your existence. But then the centuries begin to accelerate, slipping through your fingers like dry sand. You watch from your height as the world you guarded begins to look away from you. The smoke from the altars, that thick and savory incense that once sustained your divinity, grows sporadic and then vanishes entirely. The white marble of your temples doesn't fall to invaders. It falls to the slow green rot of moss and the quiet indifference of the rain. You reach out to touch the minds of your followers, but where there was once a vibrant connection, there is now a wall of glass. Humanity is waking up from its childhood, and they are putting away their myths like outgrown clothes. They call it enlightenment. They call it the age of reason. They trade the beautiful, terrifying chaos of mythos for the rigid, predictable structures of logos. They no longer see your hand in the turn of the seasons or your voice in the crack of the thunder. To them, the sky is a vacuum, and the earth is a resource to be measured and mined. You feel the first pangs of a new kind of hunger, not a hunger for food, but for recognition. Without their belief, the very air in your lungs feels thinner, and the ichor in your veins, once a rushing river of liquid sunlight, begins to stagnate like water in a forgotten well. You pace the corridors of your palace, and the silence is deafening. There are no messengers bringing news of wars or births. There are no heroes seeking your favor with the blood of bulls. The golden halls of Olympus, once vibrant with the clinking of ambrosia cups and the singing of muses, are now just cold, silent galleries where the dust settles on abandoned thrones. You look at your hands and notice they are becoming translucent, the light of the setting sun passing through your palms as if you were made of mist. You aren't bleeding, you are evaporating. This is the sensation of becoming a ghost in your own home. It isn't a sudden death, but a gradual thinning of your reality. You are being demoted from a force of nature to a figure of speech. The transition is subtle at first. You find yourself trapped in ink and paper. Your name is spoken in classrooms, not with awe, but with a clinical curiosity. You are a trope. You are a psychological archetype.
You are a metaphor for the parts of themselves that humans are too afraid to own. When they speak of your wrath, they are really talking about their own adrenaline. When they speak of your wisdom, they are merely describing their own logic. You have been internalized, swallowed by the very creatures who used to tremble at your feet. You are no longer the one who causes the lightning. You are the word they use to describe the fear of it. The world below is bright with electric lights that mock the stars you once hung. They have mapped the oceans you once ruled and climbed the peaks they once thought were your throne. To them, you are a story told to explain the dark before they learned how to banish it with a switch. You stand at the edge of the precipice, watching the lights of 1,000 cities flicker like a new, artificial galaxy.
You are the last of the giants, reduced to a line of poetry, a statue with a broken nose, a memory of a time when the world was magical and dangerous. You are no longer the master of the storm. You are the footnote at the end of the page. The silence that follows the closing of a book is the heaviest sound in the world. You are lying there, staring at a ceiling that is decidedly not the vault of the heavens. The transition is violent, though it makes no sound. One moment, your veins ran with liquid sunlight, and your will could level mountains. Now you are just a collection of carbon and salt, pinned to a mattress by the unforgiving hand of gravity. You feel the weight of your own bones for the first time in an eternity. They feel brittle, dense, and hopelessly finite. Your lungs, which once tasted the thin, electrified air of Olympus, now struggle with the stagnant oxygen of a suburban bedroom. It is a slow, dull ache, the realization that you have been demoted from the infinite back to the singular. Move your hand. It feels sluggish, as if you were pushing through invisible syrup. There is no glow beneath your skin, no hum of cosmic power vibrating in your marrow. You are back in the cage of the linear. Seconds are ticking again, and each one is a tiny theft, stealing away the youth and vigor you thought was your permanent birthright. The divine amnesia fades, and the cold, hard facts of biology rush in to fill the vacuum. You have to breathe. You have to eat. You have to age. This is the tax we pay for existing in 3 dimensions. But as the fog of that borrowed divinity clears, a different kind of clarity takes its place. You start to wonder why those ancient archetypes felt so familiar, why the lightning of Zeus or the fury of Ares felt like a memory rather than a dream. It is because the gods were never some separate species dwelling on a literal mountain. They were always just us, projected onto a larger screen. Every time you felt a jealousy so green it choked you, you were Hera. Every time you felt a creative spark that burned through the night, you were Hephaestus. We did not invent the gods to explain the weather. We invented them to explain the terrifying, beautiful complexity of our own hearts. They were our flaws given immortality. They were our highest hopes and our darkest impulses, stripped of the civilizing veneer we wear to survive the office and the grocery store. When we dream of being gods, we are not dreaming of power. We are dreaming of being seen. We want our small, messy emotions to matter on a cosmic scale. We want our morning coffee to feel like a ritual and our daily commute to feel like an epic journey. And perhaps that is the real secret of the return. The ichor is gone, but the golden glow does not have to be. As you swing your feet off the bed and feel the cold floorboards against your heels, you are not leaving the divine behind. You are bringing it with you into the mundane. Look at the way the light catches the steam rising from your mug.
Listen to the rhythm of the city waking up outside your window. There is a quiet, steady majesty in the way we persist, despite our fragility. We are the only creatures who know we are going to die, yet we still plant gardens and write songs. That is more heroic than anything a god ever did. The gods were perfect, and perfection is static. But you are unfinished. You are a work in progress, a mortal creature capable of infinite grace. Monday morning is not a prison, it is a canvas. The storm is over, the myths are closed, and you are finally, wonderfully human.